Hello, and welcome to the second of our 2021 virtual event series. As the Ocean Exploration Trust expedition begin this year, these events will be opportunities to hear about the excitement of our expeditions, preview the stories coming to you from sea and freshwater, meet inspiring teams from our core of exploration, and learn about the areas of science, technology, engineering, and exploration that excite them. So we're so glad to be having you join us via Facebook and YouTube. And do drop your comments or questions in right below, and we'll be sharing those questions with our explorers during the live event that's coming up. So if you did tune into our event last week, you'll know that we're starting off our season in a different way, in freshwater up in the Great Lakes. So while we mobilize for our 2021 season aboard EV Nautilus in Southern California right now, some of our team is actually underway with an expedition in northern Michigan, working with our partners to explore Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. But before we jump into expedition updates from the field with our team out there, let's start by getting a little bit more background about where the team is in the Great Lakes right now. So I'd like to introduce Stephanie Gandulla, Research Coordinator for the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Stephanie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day here on Lake Huron.
Beautiful. Love to see the boats behind you. And I know we're going to dive into more about what we're seeing behind you. But first, tell us a little bit about your role in this expedition and about Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary.
Yes, I would love to. So I am the research coordinator and a maritime archaeologist based in Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, the only, for just a short while, the only freshwater national marine sanctuary in the entire Office of National Marine Sanctuary system, which is a pretty cool thing. And our mission is to protect the rich maritime history and the Great Lakes right here in Lake Huron. We have 4,300 square miles of northwestern Lake Huron that we're charged with protecting. And the reason that there's a sanctuary here is because of the amazing archaeological sites that are preserved in the cold, fresh water here in Lake Huron.
Just beautiful. And Stephanie, how did you get involved with this work?
That's a great question. I'm actually from the Rocky Mountains. And so when I tell people I am a maritime archaeologist and I live in the Great Lakes and work on shipwrecks, they always wonder, well, how did that happen? And I don't have a great answer for that, except for that I've always loved being outside and exploring, whether it's mountains or our beautiful Great Lakes here in Michigan. I've been here about 10 years, and northeastern Michigan is a beautiful place. And I invite you all to come visit and see some of these shipwrecks.
That's a great lead in. Stephanie, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the Sanctuary Visitor Center and some of the opportunities for folks if they did come to visit Thunder Bay?
Yes, absolutely. So, one of my favorite things about this significant collection of shipwrecks, and I mean historically significant, we have shipwrecks that date back to the mid-19th century. Our most recent identified wreck is a German freighter from 1966. So a very, very special collection. But what's most special is what you were just referencing, and that's how people can actually experience these shipwreck sites. You don't have to be a technical diver and go down to 300 feet to see these wrecks, even though you can. You can see them and experience them in our visitor center, which is located right in downtown Alpena, Michigan. 20,000 square feet of amazing exhibits that are free and open year-round. And it's also a great jumping off point to actually get into the sanctuary aboard a glass bottom boat or aboard a paddleboard. These shipwrecks are super accessible.
It looks absolutely beautiful in this video. And it looks like it's a beautiful day where you are as well, Stephanie. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the team is doing on the expedition this year across both with Thunder Bay partners as well as other partners that we're working with?
We're super excited to be partnering again with the Ocean Exploration Trust and University of New Hampshire's Center for Coastal and Ocean Mapping. So honored that these folks are normally out exploring in the ocean all around the globe, and they're here in Lake Huron in a place that we really don't know very well. So we've only mapped in high definition, in high detail, about a little bit less than 20% of these 4,300 square miles that we're charged with protecting. So it's really important that we understand the lake bottom, not just to look for shipwrecks, but for understanding the habitat for fisheries, management, even climate change monitoring. So we're out here mapping. I hope you can see behind me. That's beautiful Lake Huron, bright blue, and it's really not so cold.
Just stunning. And Stephanie, you did mention mapping. So I think it's a good time to introduce some of the technology that we're using on this expedition. And then we'll circle back with you at the end to talk about what's next in the expedition. So to introduce the technology, I'd like to introduce Val Schmidt, the ASV robotics team lead at University of New Hampshire's Center for Coastal and Ocean Mapping. Val, happy to have you with us today.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. What a beautiful place this is. It's terrific. So let's see where to start. There's so many things to talk about, robot boats and all the bits and pieces and nerdy things that I love so much. But maybe I should talk about the Center for Coastal and Ocean Mapping just briefly. That's the lab that I work in, and it's funded by the part of NOAA that maps the seafloor to make nautical charts, and also by the part of NOAA that does ocean exploration, this kind of stuff as well. And so we're here to collaborate with you guys and Stephanie to make all of this stuff happen and to do our own research on all the robotic nerdy things.
Awesome. Well, Val, let's start off with telling, if you could tell us a little bit more about the robotic nerdy thing that is parked right outside on the dockside. I think we'll get a little bit of a tour. So tell us about ASV Ben.
Yeah, so BEN stands for the Bathymetric Explorer and Navigator. And BEN is a research project in the works that in marine robotics to make it safe and practical to take robotic boats out to sea and to do seafloor survey, the kind that NOAA does for safety of navigation, and to make nautical charts from that, but to not have to send people out to sea because frankly, I get seasick and I don't want to be out there, and I just sit here on land and drink tea and watch the boat go bobbing around out there. So BEN is kind of pint sized, it's small, it's only 4 meters long, but it's great for us because it makes it really easy to handle. We can put it in containers and ship it around the world. We can put it on ships and they can crane it over the side. It's got an endurance that's about 20 hours at its maximum speed, which is about 5.5 knots. It has a big diesel engine inside, and it's a jet drive so that we don't get things fouled on a prop. So that's nice in that regard. And it's got all kinds of sensors on it for making the operators aware of what's around it, and the artificial intelligence kind of stuff inside to work on that sensor data, and then of course the mapping as well. So in the front of BEN, there's like a hockey puck kind of antenna, and it's a GPS antenna, and there's another one right in the middle, and that's the navigation system of BEN, and those two GPSs and then a gadget inside called an inertial measurement unit tell us exactly where BEN is and what its pitch and roll is and how it's heaving up and down in the water. We got to know all of that because when we map the seafloor with the sonar, if we don't know how BEN is bobbing around, the seafloor looks like it's bobbing around. We got to subtract all of BEN's movement out of our measurements of the seafloor. And then the bit that you can't see that's really important is on the bottom of BEN, and that's the sonar. It's, for the people who care about this stuff, it's a Kongsberg EM20P. But it's a fancy sonar that projects acoustic energy down in the water. It bounces off the seafloor. We measure the time it takes to come back to the surface. And knowing the speed sound travels in the seafloor. Yeah, there's a nice picture of it with Erin checking it out, making sure that everything is in good shape down there before we put BEN in the water. But it maps the floor as we go along, collects all that data into computers and hard drives that are inside the boat, along with all that fancy navigation data. And then, and Erin will talk about this later, but then we make all the beautiful maps of the seafloor, or the lake bed, if you will, from that. There's some other fun things on there to point out. We've been working hard on keeping BEN aware of what's around it to keep everything safe. So there's a marine radar on there. It's a fancy one that is like 2 radars at one, so you can look far and short at the same time, which is kind of important to keep things safe. And then the sort of brass box on top is a 6-camera panoramic array that allows us to look in all directions at once. And in a minute, I'll show you what that looks like. And we fabricated this thing ourselves. Oh, look at that. So there's the view. This is from earlier today as BEN was coming home from a day's worth of survey. You can see our own chase boat in the back and the stern image in the bottom. That's the 3011, the NOAA boat 3011. And you can see it was a really nice day out there, not too bumpy. But that camera array, so we see this feed in real time here in the control station. But those camera images also go to artificial intelligence algorithms that can detect things like boats and people, and someday we'll train Ben to recognize all those things and do things safely on its own. But we're not there just quite yet. Let's see, what else about Ben? At the top of the
Val, I actually have a question for you from Facebook as you're going through this. Will you be able to see shipwrecks with this technique, with this mapping technology?
Yeah, so we can make the most amazing images of the seafloor with this. The resolving capability of the sonar system is really high, and we can map wide swaths of the seafloor in one go, and make very high resolution images that will tell us where all the bits and pieces of the wreck are, if there are masts sticking up, if there's things hanging from the mast, where things fell out when the ship sank. We see all of that in a really beautiful topographic kind of display, and sometimes in a 3D display as well. So yeah, it's quite a sensor. Let's see, what else is important on that thing? Our rubber ducky, you can see our rubber ducky there in the middle on top. That's for good luck.
That's very important oceanographic equipment.
It is. The captain of the Nautilus gave us that when we were having trouble, and it worked. Everything just worked beautifully after we put that guy on there. We have a horn right next to it. We just put the horn on Ben. It was foggy a couple of days ago, the first time we really operated in fog. We have to sound whistle signals for safety, and so we played those out through the horn. Of course, my team, what's the first thing that they play out through the horn here in the marina? A big fart sound. But that's not the typical safety of navigation sound, and we played proper whistle signals when we were out at sea. And then the last thing maybe that's worth talking about is at the top of the mast, and that's a bunch of antennas that provide different kinds of communications between Ben and the operators back here where I'm standing now. And that's a really key part, because you want to be able to know where Ben is, know that it's safe, see what's around it, aid it in its navigation if necessary, know when things go wrong. And so we really rely on these and monitor those really carefully.
So Val, how is ASB Ben powered?
Boats. In fact, you find a diesel engine all around the globe in sailboats like Yanmar. And it's a little guy, and it provides all the power on the boat for all the computer systems and the navigation systems, and it's also the propulsion. So so it's nice. It gives us a nice long endurance, and it's nice and small and compact so that it fits inside Ben, and we just sort of plow through the water. Off we go. It's great.
Awesome. And Val, you've been talking a lot about ASB. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry, Sam.
Oh no, if you're feeling good about the tour of ASB Ben outside, I'd love to move into the van and hear more about what you do with the data that ASB Ben collects.
Yeah, let's do that.
Sounds great.
I'll give you the nickel tour of our control van, and bear with me as I pan things around a little bit. So let me just, maybe I'll show you this first. So one of the things that we like to do, it's kind of fun, is render a CAD drawing of Ben. And although you can't see it now because Ben's not moving, but this rendering moves when Ben moves. So real time data comes back here and makes this animation of the boat bob around just like Ben is bobbing around. It's kind of fun to watch, because when Ben is in rough seas, this thing is all over the place, and you're like, "Ooh, I'm glad I'm not out there." This is the control station, Ben, and we usually have 2 or 3 people sitting here, kind of a pilot, sometimes a co-pilot to help, and then the mapping team at the end down there. The pilot sits in front of this station, and we have a map display, and if you look carefully there's a little green triangle. That's Ben. That's Ben sitting here right in the jetty of Rogers City in the marina here, and these are the buoys on the chart. We display charts and we display overlays of sonar data that we've collected in the past. And this is kind of a typical pattern that we might use for mapping the seafloor survey plan, where we kind of go back and forth, kind of a dull and dreary sort of thing. But it's great for Ben. He does it reliably, and we can sit and watch and make sure everything's going well. This piece of kit down here is we call it the belly pack. This is for piloting Ben around with joystick mode, kind of a fancy Xbox controller. But wait, we actually have an Xbox controller. This one costs like $12. This one costs like $20,000. But this one is waterproof, and that one is not. But we have them both, and we use them for backup and redundancy. We have a big red button. Every robotic boat should have a big red button, so you can stop everything if you need to. We have all kinds of data going by that tell us things about the health of the boat and the health of our telemetry systems. Those are things that the operators pay a lot of attention to. Sometimes, for example, like your radio link to the boat goes down, and you're like, oh no, what just happened? And you can look up here and realize that like a big ship just went between you and Ben, and that's why your link went down. Let's see, what else? So up here on the top, there's the camera display that we were seeing before. You can see Stephanie out there checking her Facebook, and she's waving at us. And the 3011 down in the lower right image, and then the marina out there, and our command trailer next to us. And look up there in the right, you can see a couple of officers from the NOAA Corps from the Office of Coast Survey having a chat about who knows what. But they were out with us today, and they were super, a lot of help. We got VHF radios. These are so we can talk to other ships, make sure everything is safe, arrange passage if we need to, all kinds of things. Oh, and then maybe the last thing, the manual, and just in case, right here next to the operator station.
Very important. Now, Val, speaking about the manual, great question coming in from YouTube. Was Ben built from the ground up, or was an existing hull used?
So Ben was the result of a design collaboration built by a company called ASV Global, which is now part of a larger company called L3 Harris. But it was the very first hull of its kind. And we collaborated with them to design Ben, and they did all the manufacturing for us. And then they've since sold, I think, 6 others to other customers, mostly in Europe, actually. But a few in a couple of other places. So Ben is not alone out there. And then the company certainly built bigger vessels as well that have some of the same technologies on the inside, but just in a bigger package.
Awesome. Well, Val, thank you so much for the tour of the control van and ASV Ben. We'll be feeding you some questions near the end, but we're going to head over and talk to Erin now, who did wave to us during the control van tour. So Erin Heffron is the mapping coordinator for the Ocean Exploration Trust on this expedition, as well as out on Nautilus cruises. Erin, happy to have you with us today.
Hey, Sam. Thank you. Good to be here.
So Erin, tell us about what a day in the life of a mapping specialist looks like.
We start the day. We've had the plan out the night before, so that's end of the day. I'll come back to that. We start the day here with a daily meeting where we all get on the same page. So we would have made the plan and provided it to the ASB team, and we'll just go through that, decide if there's going to be any changes in our sonar settings to try and get better data, things like that. And then this mapping team, including myself, will sit here and we'll send a mapping watch. So we will sit in this station, and we're helping the ASV team monitor all of the screens. And I'll show you my screen that didn't probably popped up in some of the Val's explanation, but we're typically monitoring one specific screen, and that is a screen we call SIS, and that's Seafloor Information Systems, which comes with the Kongsberg sonar. And that's showing us the live feed from the sonar at all times. So we'll be watching that. Out here in Lake Huron, we're looking at the data. So in that image, it's that left screen that I'm staring intently at. And I'll show it to you live as well a little bit later. But we're looking at that. We're looking at the bathymetry data, which is kind of the rainbow color in that bottom left corner view. And we're also looking at the water column, which is kind of a triangle pie shape. And so we're looking at the bathymetry data, making sure that we're getting good data. But here, Lake Huron and Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary is a lot about shipwrecks, right? So we're always monitoring that water column and looking and seeing if we have any targets coming in. But also some bathymetric targets will also show up in the water column. So it's quite cool. And we're also looking at the seabed imagery. So we collect all that data, but then at the end of the day, our day is not done. We grab the data out of ASV Ben because it's storing locally in the boat, right? We could download a file or two over the connection, but it's quite difficult. So we grab the drive and we go home and we quick process it and get out coverage maps and things like that for the team, so they know how much we were able to cover that day. And then we discuss and make our plan for the next day. So we'll figure out where we want to go survey, what kind of line spacing, any change in sonar settings, any potential issues we're seeing. We'll process the data, clean it up. So I'm sitting there at the end of the van after my watch, and Clint's in the station I'm in now, and he's doing the mapping watch standing, and I'm kind of processing some water column there in the corner. So if you look at the big screen that's kind of ahead of me, I was scanning through some water column data over an own wreck, and I believe it was the Messenger that day. So I was scanning through that and pulling out information from there. And that's pretty much the day out here for a mapping specialist.
Awesome. Now, when you talk about mapping and processing imagery, what kind of, what does that look like? Can you share some examples of some of the imagery that you processed for this lakebed mapping?
Yeah, sure. So what it looks like when we bring it in, it will start as a surface. You probably guys have some images of that. But then to kind of dig into it, we are looking at a point cloud, and I don't have it live. So we do that in a piece of software called Chimera. So here's a great view of that. So again, our processing software is Chimera. It's a bit of software from QPS. We load the sys data into there, and there you can see the point cloud. So each of those little points is a sounding. That's one measurement, and we get 400 of those every time the sonar pings. And the sonar's pinging many times per second. So we look at that point cloud, we see how well the cross lines align. There's two different colors there. That's two different lines of data. Make sure they match up, and we look for any features. And if there's any points that are well outside, we get rid of those. And so I scan through the surface. I do things like profiling, which you can see there, check targets and things like that, see if they're just artifacts or if they're actual targets like rocks, or a shipwreck would be amazing, things like that. So that's what our data looks like from the processing side. We also, I don't have any imagery, but we also get what's called backscatter, and that's the intensity from the sonar. And that is usually a grayscale image where high intensities usually indicate a harder return, and that's a choice that the operator makes, but we use it like that, and we use that as an indication of hardness of the seafloor. So like rocks and sand will have a intense reflection, and don't have any prepared images of that, but that's quite beautiful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Erin, how does this work for lakebed mapping compare to some of your work out on Nautilus or other oceanographic vessels?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I guess the first one is we are inshore, so it's both good and bad. It's great that you get to go sleep in a bed, but it's bad that you still have to like function and nobody cooks for you and all of that stuff. When we're on the ship, we have a great crew that will prepare our meals and help us get through the day-to-day life. Here we have great support from Stephanie and the Thunder Bay Sanctuary folks to do a bit of that, but we still have to do some more. But another one, salt water versus freshwater, right? So you always have that difference. And for our equipment, it means less wear and tear on the equipment, not being in salt water. But for our mindsets, it's quite interesting to think about. We're always looking at sound speed, and when we look at those profiles, usually salinity is a part of that, but salinity here is 0. But I think the big thing in my mind is the scale of operations. The ocean's big. This is a big lake, but the ocean is massive, right? So we have little ASV Ben, we have the 3011, which is our support boat. They're both fairly small vehicles. Nautilus is quite large, and the equipment that goes with it. As we are out exploring on Nautilus, we have giant ROV Hercules to do the exploration. Here, if we have an ROV, it's probably a smaller piece of equipment. The sonar, even, like you saw a picture of me earlier looking at the EM2040. It's a small sonar. It's only like this big. The one on the Nautilus is huge. It's on the hull of the ship. It's massive, and it has to be bigger to be able to be at the lower frequencies that we need to be able to get down to the bottom of the seafloor. So there you're looking at the hull of the Nautilus when it was in dry dock. And there's no people. You can see those wheels maybe for scale. The sonar arrays are massive. So that's the transmit array. And then behind that orange box is the receiver array. And so, yeah, quite large compared to that tiny little box that Val showed us earlier. Also, even just things like sound speed collection. Here we're going out on the 3011. We have a little AML CTD. It takes maybe 10 minutes to do a cast. So we send 2 people out. They have this instrument. I'm sorry, I don't have it with me, but this instrument that they probably have pictures of, that the boat, they just hand lower it over because they only have to go down 30 to 70 meters. So they just lower it, bring it back up 10 minutes later, and here they're transmitting the information. You can barely see the top of the instrument that Rob's holding there, but we use this instrument and then we chase Ben. We literally chase Ben down and hold it up, and with the wireless connection to Ben, we can transfer that CTD profile to Ben, and that gives us sound speed through the water column. And there you see Stephanie and Clint chasing Ben through Lake Huron. And then with that information, we use that to do the corrections to the data that we're getting. Because it is an acoustic pulse, we need to know how fast that pulse is going through the water column. So that's quite easy. I mean, it takes time and effort, but we can get that measurement in 10 minutes. When we go to the ocean, we're going to 3,000 meters and 6,000 meters. So you could never hand lower something down, and you can get a CTD on a winch and drop it, but it takes hours to go down. So we use things on the Nautilus like an XPT, which is an expendable bathy thermograph, which is a instrument that we launch over the back of the ship while we're underway. And that will give us sound speed while we're going. And we also have what's called an underway CTD, which is a CTD like the instrument we're having here, but on a winch that we could deploy while we're moving and collect that information. And here you see a picture of Nia, one of my colleagues. She's winding on enough line so that we can get down. So we don't just have a bunch of hand line. There's thousands, well, I think it's about 1,000 meters of line that she's wound on that probe in the front left of the picture to prepare for us to deploy it. And we can drop that over the back of the ship, go down to 1,000 meters, haul it back up on the winch, and get that sound speed information to put into the sonar. So I think, scale is kind of a big one, I guess, for the differences.
That's great. Thanks, Erin. It sounds like there are a lot of overlaps between kind of mapping for deep water and mapping for shallow water. How are you, but you in particular, were also on the expedition in Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary in 2019 that started doing some of this lakebed mapping. So how are you building on that work from that expedition this year?
Well, that year and this year, our main focus was in this area called the shipping lanes. It's an area that it is highly trafficked still. We see vessel traffic every day, and was highly trafficked through historical shipping. So the Thunder Bay Sanctuary folks thought that would be a good place to look for new potential wrecks because there was so much traffic going in and out of there. And so when we were here in 2019, I was helping to support ASB Ben. We were collecting data, and Clint, who's on our mapping team here as well, was on a vessel called the Storm. And the Storm and Ben were working together to collect data. And that year, just checking my stats here, we collected together between the two vehicles, we collected about 58 square kilometers or about 22 square miles. This year, we were going in, and any place that we couldn't quite get to, we're filling in. So there were some maps of the data and we call them fingers, and we're kind of filling in some of those blocks. So in that map, you're seeing the sanctuary kind of zooming into the Rogers City area. I'd also point out that map you're seeing in the background, and we're looking at a software called Flater Mouse here. That map in the background, it was the best available bathymetry from NCEI and a bunch of partners, and the resolution of that grid was 80 meters. That grayscale you can see now is what we collected in 2019 between ASV Ben and the vessel Storm. So that was the combined effort that I was just talking about. And then the color bathymetry that just came on is what we've collected so far this year. And this year, we've collected about 73 square kilometers of data. So altogether, we're at 130 square kilometers. So we're just building on, the data just meshes together. And that last shot was just showing you the resolution from that map of Lake Huron that the movie started with. Looks great from a distance, but as you zoom in, 80 meters of resolution is nothing. We're getting maybe 1 to 4 meters of resolution with our data. So the amount of detail you can see once you can map at that resolution is just incredible.
Fantastic. Erin, thanks for that overview of how that data is being processed from ASV Ben. I think we'll head back out to Stephanie and come back to you for questions in a few minutes. So thanks again for going over mapping and how that data is being processed. And
Great,
let's head back to Stephanie for some questions from the audience about how that data is being used and why lakebed mapping is a priority for the sanctuary.
Hello, hello. It's
Hi,
so
Stephanie.
wonderful to hear Erin and Val describe the technology behind the tools that we have out here and how cutting edge it really is. So I learned a lot just now myself.
Awesome. So Stephanie, tell us a bit more about why lakebed mapping is a priority for the sanctuary and where this data goes after it's been collected and processed.
Yes, great question. So as I mentioned earlier, the bottom of the lake, the lake bed has not been mapped in high detail. Most of it truly has not. And the benefits to that for the community are really widespread. Of course, identifying cultural heritage sites, and that's Shipwrecks, and then all the way including our tribal partners. We are co-managed by the state of Michigan, so all of our activities out here, we are in communication with the state to make sure that we are properly preserving and communicating in anything that we may find. And we're also welcome any collaborations that we may not have thought of, really. So that's why we do these events that we're doing here today, and that's why we're sort of a big feature here in the Rogers City Marina, and welcoming people to come down and talk with us and contribute to the science happening here. But yeah, so the cultural heritage sites, of course, but also community management and human health. The lake bottom has a lot of scientific stories to tell as well. We talked about fisheries, so it's important to many, many different fields of science, even national security with coastal erosion and really what the lake bottom looks like. So many, many reasons that this scientific data is important and really creates a baseline for management and for the future and for future studies. Also very excited to be a part of a binational and regional effort called Lakebed 2030, where this many organizations and individuals and agencies are working together to come up with a system to share this knowledge and to more efficiently map the lake bottom. We've got the Great Lakes Observing System, which is an amazing partner with that, USGS, US Geological Survey, Northwestern Michigan College. So a lot of recent interest and effort to really get to know what's out there.
Thanks, Stephanie. We did have a few questions coming in from the audience about how this data can be accessed, whether it's someone interested in shipwreck surveys or there's been a couple of questions about native cultural sites in Lake Huron or other nearby places, and kind of where that data goes afterwards. Are there public repositories? Is that something that's made available through your team or the larger teams that you work with?
Yes, absolutely. So we're a public agency, and so all of our data it goes through a process like any mapping data in the United States. The lakes, the ocean goes through a process where it's then available for public use. So the exact process or the timeline I don't have right with me right now, but I'd love to reach out and we'll make sure that it is publicly accessible, because that's truly the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And how can folks learn more about the activities in Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary and how to be more involved with your office, as you mentioned, looking for partnerships?
I think the best way is to go to our website, thunderbay.noaa, so NOAA.gov. We're not yet quite open, but very, very soon we'll be open after the pandemic. And it's come into our offices, which are in downtown Alpena. We have a staff contact list at our thunderbay.noaa.gov website, and we'd love to hear about people that are interested in the same things that we're interested out here, and would love to collaborate. We had a great workshop just right after COVID hit, and of course it had to be virtual, but partnered with another NOAA agency, the National Center for Coastal and Ocean Science at NCOS, and their work is to work with the local partners and regional partners and really help us use their technology to help us prioritize who and what designs we have for mapping out there. So it's not just us saying we want to go look for shipwrecks. It's us reaching out to anybody we can think of, really, and where do you want to map and why do you want to map there? And there's a great website. It's our digital atlas And if we don't have the link in there, I'll make sure I get it out to the audience. And that's where you can see where these partners have given their input. And they say, well, we want to go look at sinkholes in this area, or we want to understand the fisheries habitat in this area. And what that does is really help us to be more efficient about our mapping. And we'll choose a place where we know there's historical losses, but then maybe it's also a place where there's much more interests.
Great. Well, we've been having a couple of questions come in about shipwrecks in particular. One question was why, you know, even with the freshwater, wouldn't these wrecks have rotted away by now?
That's a great question. And they do, of course, deteriorate, but much, much more slowly than they do in the ocean. The salt water is pretty corrosive to both wood and metal, and warmer water. And then there's organisms in the ocean, particularly the shipworm, which is actually a clam that will burrow into wood and devour it. But out here in the cold freshwater of the Great Lakes, it truly is amazing preservation. I mean, we have wooden shipwrecks with their masts still standing up that sank in 1854. So they're very deep and very undisturbed. And that cold freshwater, it's like a schooner deep freeze, I say all the time.
Now, Stephanie, speaking about organisms that live in the water and that may be feeding or living off of the shipwrecks. Another question from YouTube. With the waters being warmer every year, how will this affect how long it will take before zebra mussels destroy the shipwrecks in the Great Lakes?
That's such a great question, and I've got a few answers, so I'll try and focus here. So the mussels have really, I mean, taken over. They're definitely one of the main invasive species here in the Great Lakes, and biologists and ecologists are studying them all the time. And they do have an effect on the shipwrecks, but they're not eating them or devouring them like the shipworm in the ocean. And so as far as destroying them, they don't really destroy them, but they do obliterate some important archaeological details, and they might weigh the vessel like some timbers down. But what really stands out with that question to me is the warming planet, the water here. And what this mapping can do is actually help us monitor these changes. And so I don't have a great answer except for that we're able to monitor it, and that can definitely lead to folks working on solutions.
That's great. Thanks, Stephanie. I think we're going to bounce around to some other questions back to the control van with Val. So we'll come back to you near the end to talk more about what's next in this expedition. Thanks, Stephanie.
Sounds good.
So Val, in the control van, we've got some questions coming in for you about ASV Ben. One of the questions from YouTube is, what is the maximum range that the ASV can work, and how far can Ben be from your base station?
So it turns out that it depends a lot on the weather. If there's a lot of humidity in the air, if there's a big thermocline in the atmosphere, it refracts all of our telemetry between Ben and us away from the antennas in a way that makes it really hard. So on a bad day, we probably get around 10 kilometers out with the antennas as high as they are on Ben and our van here. And on a really good day, like today was a really good day, we were out like 24 kilometers, which is like over the horizon effectively between those two antennas. So you get just the right propagation and you can go a really long ways. You have to be careful about those things, of course, but yeah, it's really neat. And I think there was a question about whether or not we're using an MBR. Someone knows their techie lingo. So we do have a marine broadband radio. It's a particular product, a particular kind of radio, one up on the mast here and another smaller one on Ben itself.
Awesome. That's quite an extensive range when the weather's good. Hope it holds out for you guys. Another question from YouTube, does the salinity and water density affect how your vehicles are built, and affect how they operate in freshwater or saltwater in the ocean?
Most ships and any boat is designed to handle most of the breadth of fresh and salt water that you'll find in the ocean and streams and estuaries. But that said, we have definitely noticed that Ben is riding lower in the water than we're used to, because of course the water here is fresh, and Archimedes' principle says that when there's more salt in the water and it's more dense, it pushes the boat up more. So we're squatting down. Of course, it could also be because we keep cramming more computers in that thing, but definitely the freshwater has something to do with it. So the boat can handle freshwater just fine and go out to sea and handle the saltwater just fine. It's differences in corrosion certainly, but the way it handles in the water is pretty much the same.
Yep, got it. Lots of questions coming in about ASB Ben. Here's one from Facebook. How have you been working with the Coast Guard to safely navigate the channel?
Yeah, that's a great question. So before we got here, we issued a local notice to mariners so that other ships would know that we're here. We also operate a AIS system on Ben. It stands for Automatic Identification Service. So Ben transmits to all the other ships around and tells them that where he is and what speed he's going, and the fact that he's uncrewed as well, that there's no one on board. Of course, we're here paying attention and listening to the radio and all of that kind of stuff. We monitor channel 16 for emergencies, just like any other ship does. And that AIS system on Ben also tells us where all the other ships are. It receives the transmissions from those other ships. So we listen to those, and those get plotted on our maps, and we can calculate how close those ships are going to come to us. And if we need to, we hail them. And so we sort of follow all of the Coast Guard's rules with regard to safe navigation that way.
Great. Yeah, that's a great shot of Ben and the storm vessel heading out. Or coming back in, hard to tell.
Yeah.
Oh, great. I think we will take another question. This is for actually everyone, but we'll do a little round robin. And I think we'll bump over to Erin in the van. So to start, and the question is, what advice would you give to a middle school or high school student interested in a career like yours?
Take all the math. Scary, but you should just do it. You're gonna have to do it sometime. And if you have any opportunities to start learning programming, it's not all about that, but I definitely am not a programmer, but learning a little bit about programming really helps you dig into the data. And then you can take many different tracks to be in a career like mine. I have more of a geology background, but many ocean mappers come from an engineering or even sometimes a marine biology background, come from many different places, and we've somehow got interested in ocean mapping. But no matter which of those backgrounds you come from, eventually the math and the coding is going to kind of get you. So you should probably start. That would be my advice.
And Erin, how did you get into mapping?
So I came out of undergraduate at Slippery Rock University, Pennsylvania, with a degree in environmental studies, but it was this very strong concentration in geology and GIS. I worked briefly at USGS in Woods Hole. It was great and lovely, and they introduced me to a software called Fledermaus. And so I went to work for Fledermaus for 10 years. There I am at a conference in Mexico, I believe, in my young days, doing a demonstration of the software. And I had the geology background to understand the kind of things they were seeing in multi-beam data, but I didn't. Fledermaus is very much multi-beam focused at the time and still is, but didn't know anything about ocean mapping. So by working at that software company, I had to learn about ocean mapping kind of on the fly. And I got to the point where I really wanted to know a lot more. So then I left Fledermaus and went to CCOM, where Val is, where I am actually still a graduate student, but very close to finishing with a master's in ocean mapping. So that's how I got there.
Fantastic. Well, we wish you the best in finishing your program. And for students who may be out there and interested in learning more about ocean mapping and seafloor mapping, Nautilus and the Ocean Exploration Trust does offer an at-sea internship program where we bring students out to sea in a couple of different tracks: ocean science, seafloor mapping, ROV engineering, video engineering, and navigation. So you can check out our website at nautiluslive.org for more information about those programs. Let's bump it over to Stephanie. Stephanie, how did you get involved, and what advice would you give to a student who's interested in a career like yours?
That's such a great question, and I think I have different answers each time someone asks me this. So today I will say, I think being interested in anything and everything and not being afraid to ask questions of anyone, because that's where I think I learned the most, and of not being afraid to ask, how does that work? I'm asking questions of Val and Erin all the time. How does that work? And not being afraid to try new things. I think that's big. because that's what it's all about. We're all learning new things every day, and if you're interested in the world around you, that's going to get you far.
Awesome. And how did you get started, Stephanie, with your interest in the world underwater?
Well, I learned to scuba dive many years ago up in Alaska before I even knew that there was such a thing as underwater archaeology. So, and then I realized that I could make a career out of something that I love doing in my free time. And I've always loved history. My undergraduate was in English literature. So that's, I think, another really good lesson is there's not always a A to B to Z straight path to what you want to do. There's lots of zigs and zags, and English literature brought me here to the Great Lakes looking for shipwrecks.
That is quite a tagline for your story. Thanks for sharing. Val, how about you? Your start and your advice for students looking at a career like yours?
Well, my advice actually is identical to Erin and Stephanie's, and that is learn some math, learn how to program, and ask a load of questions, like lots of questions. In fact, Erin can tell you, I have been a student in her class actually learning about Platermouth software, and she hated me because I asked so many questions. But those questions are good, and it teaches you all kinds of things, and everybody else in the room is thrilled that you asked that question because they wondered the exact same thing. So you got to be fearless. And I think the other thing that is tough is that, you know, like I was thinking about it in school, you're taking math classes and science classes, and you're learning all this stuff that all these Nobel Prize winners like figured out, and it took them their entire lives to figure out, and you got to learn it in a semester. And so like take a deep breath and don't fret and keep at it. It's not a sprint, it's like a marathon, and you just keep learning and keep trying, and eventually it'll all sink in. And the more you learn, actually, sometimes the less you realize that you actually know, but it's an adventure, and you're not alone. Like there's all of us with you together. So I think, yeah, that's my advice. I got into this because when I finished school, when I finished my undergraduate degree, I joined the Navy. And I was in the submarine fleet, and during my time in the submarine fleet, I was lucky enough to be part of a unclassified program that went up under the polar ice cap to map the seafloor up under the ice from the submarine. So they strapped a big sonar on the bottom of the submarine, and this picture was taken a long time ago, but I was the conning officer on the submarine, giving orders to drive the ship under the ice up through the Bering Strait. And I can tell you it was like both fun and terrifying at the same time. But that sort of started a love for ocean science and seafloor mapping, and I for seafloor mapping and have continued on and now learned about robotics and all of that, and it's super fun.
That's great. From submarines to surface vessels, quite a path as well. Well, thank you all for those answers. We've got a couple of more questions about the sanctuary before we wrap up. So back over to Stephanie. There's been a couple of questions about the NOAA Corps officers that are helping you with this expedition. What's their role?
Well, actually, the NOAA Corps officers have come as a part of the NOAA's Office of Coast Survey team. And they're always helpful wherever the NOAA Corps goes. They're always very helpful. But I think Val could better answer that partnership with CCOM and with Office of Coast Survey.
Happy to answer that. They've come to help out, to pitch in, to learn about robotic boats and how to operate them from shore, to see the technology that we've developed, and to help us understand the mission, and to and actually to help us even develop the technology, to say, you know, that should be different and we should do this a different way, and wouldn't it be cool if we had this and that, and we have them here standing watches, driving the boat, using their expertise for basic ship driving to drive the robotic boat when it's out at sea, drawing on their expertise for actually making hydrographic bathymetric maps and operating the sonar. So we have a really tight collaboration. They inform all of the research that we do. We try to design and build things that are practical, that you can actually go and take out to sea and use. And so we're thrilled to have them here, and they've been a great help. It's terrific.
Great. And Stephanie, a question for you. How deep is Lake Huron, and what kind of life lives there?
Wonderful question. So Lake Huron is 750 feet deep. It's also the 4th largest lake in the entire world. I was looking up trying to refresh my stats on the Great Lakes here. So I'm going to throw a few more at you before I talk about life. But it does provide water, fresh drinking water, to 40 million people, the 5 Great Lakes do. And it encompasses 21% of the planet's fresh surface water. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it's a pretty important place that we're protecting and working in here. And as far as life, it looks a lot different than the ocean underwater, but it still is full of life. There are over 150 different species of fish. And one of my favorite fish is the burbot, which is a really cool looking freshwater cod species. And you'll see him and his buddies on some of the deeper shipwrecks because they like cold water.
Great fish name. Thanks for sharing those facts. We've got one more question from the audience before we wrap up with a little bit of what's next for the expedition. Zach, age 8, asks, do you consider your jobs to be hard? Who wants to start?
I do. I consider my job hard, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, I think that's the adventure and the fun of it, and the camaraderie and the friendship that you build with your buddies who are also struggling with the same stuff. Erin and I are elbow to elbow trying to scratch our head and find out why things are working the way they are, sometimes not working the way they are, and it's hard. I'll admit, like, sometimes it's tough, and you go home scratching your head, and you come back and do it the next day. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I think it's great.
That was a great cut too, because you're, in the same camera angle. It's very clear that you're working in a small confined space. Erin, how about you?
It's hard. But challenging, and I mean anything so much better than being bored. It's fantastic. We go away every day exhausted, and we start the day exhausted, and the field season is long, and it's amazing, and I wouldn't do anything else.
Awesome. And Stephanie, we can hear birds singing in your background. What about you?
Oh, it's just sunshine and bird song here for us. No, it's my job. I think it's challenging, and it is hard, and we get tired and exhausted. And I echo exactly what Val and Erin said, that I wouldn't have it any other way. That's what keeps it interesting and makes me want to come to work every day. And it's hard, but the sharing of it is probably one of the most rewarding things, is that we might be tired at the end of the day, but being able to share our work and to hopefully inspire folks out there and students to learn more about the Great Lakes, that's very rewarding and makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. Are there particular resources, Stephanie, that you want to highlight from Thunder Bay as Thunder Bay's collection?
Yes, we have some, outstanding educational resources on our homepage. Lots of links there that can get you where you need to go. And the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries has some great educational resources. And then when we open up again and we have our field trips for more regional people that are on the webinar here, we have hundreds and hundreds of students that visit every summer. And throughout the school year, to go out in the glass bottom boats, to build their own robots, to test water quality. So some resources right here in the area for sure.
Awesome. Okay, one more question for me. That's a quick round robin before, as I've been teasing, Stephanie will tell us what's next in the expedition. The question is, what's your favorite control van snack? Val.
We had these like little pretzel things with peanut butter on the inside. I think I ate the whole package by myself.
Good to know. Good snack. Erin.
Sticks. We've had every flavor of meat sticks that NOAA has to offer.
Regional specialty. Wonderful. Stephanie.
I don't think I can pick just one. I like the gummy bears that I've been, I think, stealing. I don't know whose those are, but thank you. The gummy bears are good. Thanks, Erin.
Secrets out. All right. Thanks, everyone. So, Stephanie, what is next for this expedition?
The next, we're just going to continue. We're about halfway through with Ben here, and continuing to map and fill in the gaps of the area just off the shores of Rogers City here. And then looking for more ways to get more exciting technology here to test and to map and just continue on.
Fantastic. Well, if folks at home want to continue to follow along this expedition, you can check out the Nautilus Live website for updates, as well as follow Nautilus Live and Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary on social media. As far as the Nautilus season goes, we are kicking off on July 8th with another one of these live events. So you can learn more about our 2021 expedition season, and our live stream will start in mid-July. So we're looking forward to continuing to explore the Great Lakes and freshwater with Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary for the next few days, and then start our ocean exploration season. So we really hope that you're able to join us, as well as follow along with the current expedition that's happening now. So thank you so much for answering our questions, Stephanie, Erin, and Val, and we will stay tuned for updates from the field. Thanks, everyone.